Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Categorically Romance podcast. My name is Bree, and I am joined today by Harlequin Intrigue author Katie Mettner. Katie, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so happy to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I mean, kind of a secret between friends. We've done this before, but being so, that episode didn't get put out. Can you tell us again, but for the first time, a little bit about you and tell us about the types of books you enjoy writing?
Yes, yeah, we did try this for the Red River Slayer, which was my last Harlequin release, but due to technical difficulties, well, on my end, that didn't work out. So we'll try this again. Um, I've been writing romance and romantic suspense for about 13 years now. But I've only been writing for Harlequin for about 3 of those years. I live in northern Wisconsin, and I'm married to a teacher who teaches middle school, and therefore I think he should get a saint award when he goes to heaven. Um, Together we have 3 kids. They're all adults, which is very strange to say, but they're off doing their own thing, which is wonderful. Um, we have a miniature dachshund named Lilibet Lynn, who is also my service dog, which everybody laughs about, but honestly, she's a very good service dog. She pulls my wheelchair. She is a balance for. I'm an amputee, so if I'm walking, she's like a balance for me, so I don't
Oh,
fall over. And she's kind of on the bigger side of miniature dachshunds, so it works. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't work. But like I said, I've been an amputee for over a decade now, and I also have gastroparesis, which is a disease of your stomach, which keeps you from being able to eat. So I have all of my nutrition goes into my intestines through a feeding tube. So that's kind of where the people with disabilities comes in for my writing. Um, when I'm not writing, which is very rarely, because most of us know as a writer, if you're not actually sitting down writing, you're still thinking about writing. So I think
mhm.
that counts. But I like to bake, crochet, hang out with my kids, go up to Lake Superior with my husband, and um, kind of travel around the state of Wisconsin because I have kids in every corner.
Yeah. What subject does your husband teach? I teach sixth grade English, so I just have to know what does he
You get
teach?
the Saint Award as well.
Thank you. What does
he
he
teaches
teach?
uh, he teaches fifth grade, so they do it a little different because they're fifth graders. So he teaches science and math,
Oh,
and
cool.
then
Okay.
computers. So
Oh.
yeah, and then the other
Has he
side
always
of
done
the
fifth grade?
he did first grade his first 2 years,
Wow.
and that was the end of that. And then
Yeah.
because he's 6'2", and two bills, and these little kids are looking at him like, I'm scared of you.
You're a
So
giant.
yeah,
Yeah.
so and he does he likes the older grades. He likes having discussions with the kids and being able to really get into the meat of. He also teaches social studies, I should say. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, he really
Yeah.
enjoys that.
Yeah. Oh, I just love hearing about your dachshund. Like she just sounds like such a I would just my little nephew has cerebral palsy and I've been telling my sister like get him a service dog. Get him a service dog. Like just we just don't deserve dogs. They are just so smart and they just will do anything for you. They just want to be
Absolutely,
loved.
I
They just want to be
agree.
loved.
And everybody looks at me and they're like, a miniature dachshund? She pulls my wheelchair. I mean, she's a very muscular miniature dachshund, I will say that. But she pulls my wheelchair. She picks things up for me that I drop if I'm in my chair. If you think outside the box, you really can. If you have a dog that's easily trained and well behaved, they can be a service dog. It doesn't have to be a German Shepherd or a Golden Retriever or if you think outside the box and you get a dog with a great temperament, it can work.
Yeah. Well, I watched on your website, you had this interview that you did with CBS News Minnesota. And it was just this wonderful interview. They were talking about, was it for, I think it was like they were doing a special on like disabilities. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was for Disability Pride Month in July.
Disability Pride Month. I was like, I remember it was disability and pride, but I couldn't remember. And
Yeah.
at the end, you stated so beautifully, you were like, we all deserve a great love story. So do you remember when or how? I think for a lot of us, like readers, we remember the moment where it's like, huh, I not really seeing myself. So, as a writer, do you remember when it dawned on you that either you wanted or you just felt this need to like write inclusive stories that had characters with disabilities? Like, do you remember how that hit you?
Yeah, it actually hit me as a reader. I mean, I've always been a writer, but not, I would just write short stories or kids' books, just for fun kind of thing. But after my amputation, I was looking for, actually, no, it wasn't. It was after I had a shoulder surgery and I had to be in this chair for like 4 hours a day where I moved my arm up and down. It was ridiculous. But anyway, I was looking for, more inclusive romance, and there just wasn't any. It was just, if there was a character with a disability, they were always a secondary character, and it was usually a poor pitiful pearl type of situation. And it was never any kind of empowered person with a disability or main character with a disability. And I did find some that had main characters with disabilities, but they were always very inaccurate, sometimes grossly written. And you could often tell that the person, well, you could always tell that the author was not someone with disabilities. Um, but, this was back in the early 2000s. So after my amputation, I went looking again because it was probably 3, 4 years later. And I'm thinking, well, we've made some advances now. We've got Kindles, this should be easier to find. Yeah, no, still wasn't there. And so that was the day that I decided, all right, if you can't complain about it if you don't do something about it. So I decided I would sit down and I would write a story, a book. Well, no, I intended it to be a story. And then 400 pages later, we had ourselves a book. And I hadn't initially, I'd had this character kind of knocking around in my head for years, and I hadn't initially planned to make her disabled. But when Sugar Dubois was born, she was in fact a character with a disability, and that was how we got there.
From what I can see online, your first Harlequin Intrigue released in February of 2023. But you have this whole backlist that goes back to like 2011. So talk about your journey to like how are we getting these Harlequin intrigues now from you? Like what was your journey there?
Yeah, actually, Sugar was the first book that was published in 2011 and
Mhm.
was actually not supposed to be published. Um, I readily admit this. I wrote the book and I knew nothing. I mean, I was a full time mom, I was a full time medical transcriptionist. I did not have a lot of spare time on my hands. And my sister edited the book for me. She did have a degree in English, thank you. So I felt like a little comfortable with that. But anyway, I wanted to get copies for my family and friends. So I just Googled, I mean, I'm still picturing in my mind kind of the vanity publishers, where you could get 200 books printed for whatever. But I came across KDP and I was like, oh, okay, I can get Kindle copies that way too. Fabulous. So I upload the book and just make this bizarre cover. I mean, it wasn't bizarre, but it was just kind of a stock cover like they used to offer back in the day. I threw a lighthouse up on it, whatever. Okay. Thinking I would just be able to order the books, download the Kindle copies. No, it turns out I published the book
I love that.
and it went live
Yeah.
and I was
Like
unaware.
oops.
Yeah, I was completely unaware. And until I started getting messages from people like on Facebook, and they would find me like just randomly online. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. What is going on? So I go and look, and that's when it tells me that it was published on Amazon. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess if people are reading it, we'll just leave it there.
Yeah, it's out there now. It's
Yep.
already been
Yeah.
read.
Can't walk this back. So that was how Sugar was born. And interestingly, back then, that was 2011, that was the major heyday of indie publishing, where if your book existed, it got read. You didn't need to do ads, you didn't need to really market much. Just if it existed, it was read. And so I was getting a lot of people with disabilities emailing me, messaging me, that this is the first time they ever saw themselves represented accurately, and not just in the inspirational side of it, like, oh, you're so wonderful because you're an amputee and you're doing all this, but also in the very dark moments of being a person with a disability. And so they wanted more sugar. And I'm thinking, man, that was 400 pages. How much more do you need? But it turned out they needed a 4-book series and a spinoff. So, so that's what they got.
Yeah.
And that was Romantic Suspense, that series. And so then I kind of segued into writing just contemporary romance, depended on, kind of the characters, what I wanted to make it, if it was suspense or not. That was a long way to get to Harlequin, which didn't happen until about, well, it was just 3 years ago because I was moving my then 16-year-old son to Madison for college in the middle of a pandemic. And I was a little nervous about that, needless to say. So I started writing. That's how I kind of lose myself when I need to forget about real life. And had saw a writing prompt, and it said, "Your main character steals something they need to survive." And I thought, okay. And that was the moment Minna Jacobs was born. Um, and she normally I would write in first person, right? But I've written in or read intrigues for, gosh, I'm going to date myself here, but probably 30 years, probably more than
Wow,
that now.
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
since I was 15. And so I'm like, I can write an intrigue. Man,
You've read
I've
them
been
so
reading these
long,
forever.
yeah.
I mean, there isn't one that I haven't, I would read all four every month. And that was back in the day when you had to order them and get them delivered and you paid cash on delivery. So that kind of dates me. Um, but of course now there are six, but back then there was four. Anyway, I thought I'm going to give this. Normally, I write in first person, but I thought I'm going to give this third person writing a try. I had done it with a Christmas book and it was very successful. So I thought, okay, I can do this. Really was not super comfortable in third person because I was afraid I wouldn't be able to really portray a character's emotions. Because when it comes to writing characters with disabilities, that's very, very important to get across. But I did. And I submitted it to the Romance Includes You. Um, Back then it was Twitter event that they were having, and if you got a like from a publisher, then you could send them your entire manuscript. Now, mind you, you had a 60K word book that you had to get down into like 140 characters in order to
Mhm.
capture them to be able to send them your manuscript. So I did. I got a like from Allison Lyons, who is now actually the senior editor for Romantic Suspense, but sent it in and forgot all about it. I sent it in about 4 days before my mother-in-law passed away in November. And it just kind of slipped my mind that it was sitting there, waiting to be looked at. So in January, I finally contacted Miranda and I was like, I haven't heard anything. And I just remembered myself, but they said, it would be 6 weeks and it's been much longer than that. So she got into looking for it and apparently there had been some editor changes or whatever. And so it finally had landed on Allison's desk and she called me up that she loved it and wanted to buy it. So that was the start of my Harlequin career. Um, we are now 6 books with Secure One and a 4-book spin-off series called Secure Watch that I'm just finishing up right now. So we are 10 books deep with that kind of series for Harlequin.
Well, that was one of my questions was like, did you grow up reading suspense novels? And now I know you've been reading intrigue for so long. Do you remember like what it was about them that captured you when you first began reading them or you first picked the first couple of them up?
Of the intrigue specifically,
Yeah, the intrigues. Or like had you been reading mysteries before
yeah, I
then and
was
then
always a mystery reader from the
okay.
time like the Boxcar Children, which to me was kind of a suspense mystery book. And if you think
Yeah.
about it, it really kind of was. Um, all the way through, then I started reading like Mary Higgins Clark, and I loved her books, and Carol Higgins Clark. I was not a fan of the Harlequin romance because my mom and my grandma always read like the Presents. I think it was Silhouettes back then, with the princes and the princesses in the foreign country. That wasn't my jam. I needed more. And one day I was down at our used bookshop in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, where I lived at the time, and they had like shelves of used Harlequin. And I came across Intrigue and I thought, oh, well, what's Intrigue? And so I flipped it over and started to read the back and I was like, all right, I have found it. I have found
I found my club.
like this was the mecca right here because there was so many used ones on time, and that was back in the day when you could fill like a paper grocery sack for a quarter. And then you turn them back in, then you get credit to get more. So that was how I first came across the intrigues. And I liked them because I always say that intrigue focuses on the crime and it has to be solved by the hero and the heroine together. Or,
Mhm.
maybe one is the hero might be the sheriff and the heroine, he's protecting the heroine or whatever it may be. Versus romantic suspense where it's more the focus is on the love story, but then there's a suspense element to it. Um, but I kind of feed on that, on the crime itself, of solving the crime itself while the couple is kind of falling in love with each other, if that makes sense.
So when you're writing, is it usually are you trying to come up with okay, what happened first? Like, are you coming up with the crime first and then figuring out the introducing yourself to the characters and, like, who's gonna solve it? Or do you start with the characters? Like, how does that work?
Usually I start with the characters, and the reason I do that is because not all disabilities work with all suspense elements.
Mhm.
So what I have to do is I have to know my character and what their disability is and what their abilities are in like an action scene type situation. So I can't ever obviously have a character who uses a wheelchair who now needs to wheel through the woods. That's not going to work. Um, so generally speaking, I work whatever the crime element is around who the characters are, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That way I know for sure that it's going to be genuine, it's going to be accurate, and that it's not going to give any false pretenses to anyone about what someone with that specific disability can or can't do,
Mhm.
physically anyway.
Well, this I mean, you may have already answered this, but, like, creatively wise, what are you enjoying about writing your characters now in the world of intrigue, especially because you've been reading it for so long? So creatively, like, what is that doing for you?
Creatively, I think it's stretching my knowledge of disabilities because I can't just use the same disabilities over and over again.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's, well, would be okay in the respect that, the disabled community is the largest community in the world, so it's always going to land on somebody's doorstep who needs to read it. But with suspense, you just can't do that. You, like I said, you have to try to find um, plots that work for what you're trying to do or what you're trying to teach or get across with whatever disability that character may have. That's the best way to word that, I guess.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I'm enjoying writing the books that represent people with disabilities, but not just that, but people with disabilities who are saving other people.
Yeah.
In fact, the first book, A Secure Watch, they just might save the entire world. And so I think that that's empowering for a lot of people to see, and not in like an inspirational porn kind of way, because I'm very honest about um, what they go through with their disability, but that doesn't mean that they can't still make a huge difference, in the world or in the lives of other people, which I
Absolutely.
think is missed a lot, uh, especially on social media. And you see a lot of social media content creators who are starting to experience the same thing, where that message is missed, um, because people just want us to either be inspirational or be quiet and not be seen.
Yeah. There's like they know like there's no middle ground, you
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. There's just no middle ground. It's very frustrating.
Well, with the world, like being a writer for the line and having been, a long time reader of it, when it comes to the crime, how do you think as the world continues to evolve, like how is the crime part of it changing? Is it becoming more challenging or is it becoming easier to
Oh,
write? Like
it's
what do you
so
think?
much more challenging.
Okay.
So much because there's so much technology. You know, back when I was reading them, when I was 15, there wasn't cell phones, there was no way to track people. Now you've got iPhones that have Find My Phone and Find My Tablet and Find My. So in a way, I guess in a way that does make it easier to a degree, because you have that tech at hand that you can be like, here's a special phone, and if you hit this button, it's an SOS button, and it'll notify us in the control room that you need help without having to dial anyone. But on the other hand, you've now got a phone in your hand and you can be traced. So you can't be like, nobody can find us. Yes, they can. You literally are holding a phone in your hand. And that goes for any kind of phone. All somebody has to do is say, oh, well, let's just hit find her phone, or let's see where her phone last pinged. Um, so you have to think of all those kind of things ahead of time as you're writing, um, that you never had to do before. You
Mhm.
know, you have to think about GPS in cars, how you can be tracked in vehicles that you never, could be tracked before. Which I think is why this cybersecurity secure watch, spin-off series that I'm writing for Harlequin is so easy to write. I could come up with, 10 different plots very easily, just because there's so much tech out there now and so many different things that are going on in this world, with deep fakes and AI and all this other stuff that, as the world changes, so does our writing. We can't write the way that we did, um, even 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always say, I'm like, I don't know how intrigue authors sleep at night because y'all are so invested into all, it becomes such a part of you. Y'all are so aware of like everything that's going on in the world, and I think your mind is immediate, like, how can I make this dark?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and not just like I've been working on, like I said, book three, and it's about a another COVID type, virus. And well, it's not actually about that, but that's kind of the center point of how do we protect people from this happening. And I was very blocked. Like I couldn't figure out, how am I going to avoid the government, and how am I going to avoid this, and how am I going to avoid that, and how am I going to make this work? And then eventually you just kind of have this breakthrough and you're like, oh, if I do that and I do that, I can get around that. And the computers are bricked, so nobody can use the computer. So sometimes you really kind of have to, stretch your knowledge of tech, and sometimes you have to ask people, and you have to, reach out to experts, and you have to do a lot of googling, which you also have to take with a grain of salt, and you have to do your double checks on. But you can do it, but it does take a lot of extra time versus writing a romance that, the most you have to know about is maybe the country it's being set in,
Mhm.
or whatever it may be. So it does take that little bit of extra time and research, but I think it's worth it. I want to give the readers a story that makes sense, is timely, and is accurate.
Well, it looks like we have a couple of upcoming titles from you. So, The Silent Setup in November, The Masquerading Twin in December, and Holiday Under Wraps in January. So tell us all the details about like the writing schedule, the routine, like how are we getting these 3 books kind of back to back?
Yeah, they've actually been done for, probably going on 2 years. It's just that Going Rogue in Red Right County was supposed to be a standalone when Allison bought it. And then we got to editing and stuff. They're like, we really should know what happens with this part and this part. So we added two more books, and that was The Perfect Witness and The Red River Slayer, which just released this year. And but then they were like, but wait, we have this other character and this character, and the reader's going to want to know why she's the way she is and why he's mad about everything. So here we go, right? And so then I was like, okay, so I can do that. But then we got to book five, and I was like, I'm an even person. I'm not an odd person. We need six books. So we wrote. So I wrote Holiday Under Wraps, which they're going to be in stores November, December, and January, but they'll actually release online in October, November, and December, which I know gets confusing for people, but that's, kind of how it is. So if you want Holiday Under Wraps for Christmas reading, you will be able to get it. But I digress. Um, So that was how we got there. And usually what I do for books when I'm writing for Harlequin, because they want a proposal for each book, and the proposal is a few chapters and a synopsis. So what I do is when I get the first book approved to write, I write it, and then I write the first three chapters of the next book and a synopsis, and I submit all of that to my editor. And then I wait for her to approve, that next book on the proposal, and then I write that, and then I do it all over again for however many books I'm contracted for. That way I know for sure that it's going in the direction they want it to go in. Sometimes, honestly, I'll be real, I don't wait. I keep writing on that next book while I'm waiting for her to approve it, only because I know I can go back and rework anything I need to rework if she wants to change something, or whatever it may be. Because sometimes when you're in that flow and you're in the groove, you don't want to stop, because then it takes so much. It's so much harder to get back into it, which was the struggle I had with the one I'm writing right now. So that's just kind of how I do it. I know everybody has a different process when it comes to writing. Um, but that was how we got them back to back. And Harlequin does like to release books in series as back to back as they can, or at least as much as they can within 1 year. Which didn't obviously work for book one, but that was just because, like I said, that was supposed to be a standalone. Um, but now going forward, my series will release, more condensed, as much as they can fit it within the schedules that way.
Mhm. Um, the silent setup. So it's releasing the soonest. Can you tell us what it's about?
Yes, the silent setup is about Eric Newman, who is a team member for Secure One, and Sadie Cook, who is a woman he meets during a job that he's doing, a remote job that he's doing. Um, However, she unexpectedly drops in on him at Secure One with her nephew, Houston, and I'm not going to tell you how that happens, but it happens. And that's when she tells him her sister Katie has gone missing. Sadie and Katie, you'll understand why. She knows she didn't run away, and she knows something's wrong, but nobody will listen to her. In the process of this happening, Sadie is accused of a crime that occurred when Eric first met her at her workplace at his remote job. However, he was there and he knows she didn't do it. How does he know this? Well, he's deaf and he reads lips. And he was able to, I can't give too much away, he was able to see the guy and what he said because he could read lips. So he knows it wasn't her. So that was kind of this twisting journey of how they figure out who has Katie, why Sadie is being set up, no pun intended. And it also sets up book 5 for the reader, who finally gets to find out what Selena is hiding. Selena is another member on the team. And everybody knows something isn't quite right with her, but nobody knows what. And so they finally get to discover that, yeah, Selena's hiding some big things in her life.
Sounds so good. It sounds like the perfect November read, or if we get it early on, if you get it early on the Harlequin website in October, read like a perfect fall read. So
Yeah, it does. It takes place in the fall, so you'll have that feel to it, that kind of dark, rainy, um, type of feel to the entire book.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I'm sure you're working on something now, but if you are, can you tell us what it's about, or
You
like
know
what
I
are you
am.
working on?
Yes, I am actually, like I said, I'm finishing the third book in the Secure Watch series. I'm calling it Phantom Fear. I don't know what the final title will be. They get to decide that. It's the cybersecurity spin-off series for Secure One, and actually they kind of work together. You'll see other characters from Secure One in each book for Secure Watch, because Minna Jacobs is the lead for Secure Watch. Um, Phantom Fear is actually a sapphic romance, and that means that love interests are both female. And I've written two other sapphic romances, and I love to explore all love in my books. And I was so excited when I got the go ahead to write this as a sapphic romance. It'll be one of the first intrigues with a lesbian romance, but it's the third book in the series and a standalone. So if people don't want to read it, they don't have to. Book one in the series, Dark Web Investigation, releases in July of 2025. And then the rest of the series will release still in 2025, but closer to the end of the year. But anyway, Phantom Fear, like I said, it's about a virus that they're trying to contain within this research center. And somebody gains control of their system, their ventilation system, their containment system, and is using it for ransomware. And so they
Okay.
call in Secure Watch to, try to get control back of their containment system and stuff so that this deadly virus isn't released, because they don't know enough about it yet to know, like, will it stay in the air, will it, what they'll know what will happen to the person if they get the virus, but they don't know like how long it will survive. And obviously they don't want to take any chances. So it's kind of a locked room mystery in a way, because it all takes place within this research center, which is very difficult, very
Yeah, usually
difficult.
intrigue, you're kinda, like, out and
You're
about
all
and all
over the
over the place.
place. And you still are in a way, but because it's cybersecurity, um, it's a little bit more. Well, this one is very locked room, but the cybersecurity series in and of itself for this one is less, running, because obviously you don't really need to. No one's chasing you except online. Um, and so
I
you can.
love Locked Room, it just makes me think of, like, one of my favorite movies of all time is Clue, and it's like, they're
Yes,
literally in
yes.
the house the
It's
whole
very,
time, you know?
yes. It's very cluish, except, you know, in this case, the person that is doing it is somewhere, you have no idea where, you have no idea what they're going to do next, because they're not even in the room with you. And so you're kind of at their mercy of trying to um, guess what they're going to do next and be ready to, you know, volley back depending on what they do. So yeah, it's very. This one has been a challenge, but I love a challenge, and it's been kind of an interesting idea. That there are these types of research centers all over the world, and if something like this happened, I always try to say, if I'm going to write a book, I want to make sure it could actually happen.
Mhm.
And sometimes that makes it frightening, like the dark web investigation, which is the first book in the series. And that book is about a coder who figures out how to take control of every camera in the world and get the data from those cameras. Um, and if one person has all of that information, what can they do with it?
Yeah.
And how evil that could become. And so it's those types of things that we don't think about in our day-to-day life. We just go about thinking that we're safe. um, and we are, to a degree. Obviously we have all these homeland security and places out there that are doing these jobs for us, but there's always somebody out there trying to think of another way around something to
Negate
not
that
to
safety
negate that
measure.
safety,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that's kind of what I try to do is just make people think a little bit that, hey, we need to watch ourselves, we need to watch what we're doing online, we need to know everything we're doing and everything we're saying, and what our data is and where it is, so that we aren't putting ourselves or our families at risk. So yeah, but I think it's been fun writing Secure One, and the last two books of the Secure Watch series really use Secure One heavily, and so I haven't decided. I don't really think I want Secure One to be done, so I might go back with a proposal for a couple of joint investigations.
Oh, that would be
Um,
cool.
yeah, between them, where they need Secure Watch people and Secure One people running both, for the same. So I think that would be fun, but I have to come up with that, and I need to finish these two first, so I can't get too far ahead of myself. But
Yeah. Don't
which I
get too
tend to
ahead of
do.
yourself.
Yeah, I tend to do that. So I don't want to do that.
Well, tell everyone where we can keep up with you online.
Yes, you can find me on Facebook at Katie Mettner Author. I have a private face group there as well called Katie Mettner's Book Buzz Cafe. I can never say that. I don't know why I decided to make that the title of it.
Because it sounds
um,
cool.
it sounds cool. It is. It's a great group. We have a ton of fun. We do a ton of giveaways. That is also the only place to get ARCs, early reader copies of any of my books, either my indie or my Harlequin. So you have to be part of that group if you want to get in on any of those. You can also find me on my website, katiemettner.com. I'm also on Instagram as Katie Mettner Author. And those are my main socials. I don't do TikTok or Twitter. Oh, I'm sorry, X. Um, but I also have my info for like my emails and my contact information on my website, so you can find me there. At any time you need to get a hold of me.
And to round us off, knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell Katie at the beginning of her writing career? Like, what would you tell yourself?
I think I would tell myself to stop being afraid of being afraid and take risks.
Mhm.
Like publishing your book without knowing you're publishing your book. No, just kidding. What I mean is stop being afraid of getting your work out there and read. And don't be afraid to, and I can say this because now we're in the era of having to run ads. So don't be afraid to run ads, submit to contests, um, you know, that kind of thing. Would I change how I got to today? No. Not in the respect of accidentally publishing the book and,
The
kind of,
best whoops story ever.
yeah, and kind of trying to play catch up on
Mhm.
being an author because I met so many wonderful people. I met so many wonderful authors who helped me along the way. And I feel like altering the course of how I did that means I would also alter the course of the authors I met and the readers I met, and the friends that I've made along the way. But so I think I can say safely that, put your work out there and don't be afraid to put your work out there. And don't be afraid of the people who are going to say, ew, romance with disabled people, ick, which was my fear because I had some of that in the beginning. Um, they aren't the ones that matter. The ones who matter are the ones who are aching to read romance with people with
Exactly.
disabilities.
Yes.
And so that is just something that, has evolved over time for me. But I think if I could go back, I would tell myself, it's going to be okay. You're going to survive. You're going to wake up every morning. The sun's still going to shine. You're still going to write your books. And it doesn't matter what, the naysayers are saying. And so
And
that's
I think it's
what
just so beautiful that, like, those readers are out there. You
oh,
just gotta put the books out, and it will find its way to them, you know?
exactly. And that's what I always say. That's why I'm here. I'm not here to, make a ton of money. I'm not here to, be rich and famous. I'm here to tell the stories that people need or want to read.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, it's they need to read it because they need to see themselves represented in a way that empowers them to keep looking for love.
Yes.
And not in an, like I said, not in an inspirational way, but just in a within yourself kind of way that you matter and you deserve that
You
kind of
deserve
happiness
it.
too.
Yes.